second episode of Drive-In Theater. This time around, we've got the grand Love Bug remake from the 90s, the best version that there will ever be of this film, probably forever.
Are you trying to start a fight?
No, I'm just stating facts over here.
It's a bold stance, but episode 2, you gotta go all out.
First, we got photographer, writer, podcaster, Toni Scott. You do anything else? You do art. Yeah. What don't you do?
Skateboard. Can't do that.
All right. We got Joe Ligo, YouTube channel AutoMoments, formerly of Motor Week, and you were responsible for a lot of the retro reviews, correct?
I was involved. I wasn't the main person, but I definitely helped. I helped on the equipment side, getting like the old tape decks working and getting the equipment needed, but I wasn't the one who decided what was going to be on YouTube each week. So I made it possible, but my friend Ben Davis gets the credit for having the impeccable taste in what vehicles.
Thank you both for your service, trust me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love those episodes. All right, well, let's not talk too much about that. Let's get into the Love Bug, which as soon as you get into the opening of this movie, which it premiered on ABC Network on local TV and that sort of thing. It was they had the Wonderful World of Disney block where they showed like movies and that sort of thing, which I think they brought that back recently, but that's where it was. So it opens with like this montage of like Woodstock footage that I assume they just put there to like fill time, because that's what it feels like a lot of this movie is, just filling time. It's like a brisk 90 minutes and they really stretch it out. So you got this montage and it's like, in the 60s people knew how to love or something, even cars knew how to love. And I feel like if this were a real movie, not a TV movie, like they would have put like a montage of like the characters racing or whatever to actually establish who they are, and not just put the camera in front of them.
Right. There is you can tell that the budget was clearly not there, because there's very little actually race for a movie about a race car. There's very little racing. Exactly. But that could be said for all of the Herbie movies except
my
the
favorite
first
thing
one.
I think about 3 minutes into the movie. So they've actually established the villain character first, and he's driving Herbie in the first scene, and he's like, the car's smoke, he's getting past with like a Triumph TR6, I think, and like an old Mini Cooper or whatever, which is cool. But like, he pulls off the track and he's like, I hate this car or whatever, and then he just casually drops to his, I don't know, lackey. It feels weird to say assistant because he's clearly not supposed to actually be an assistant for this. But he's like, I should be back racing in Formula 1. And it's like, instead of driving these little crap cans, and it's like, so that's all we're getting on that. He's like, they didn't have any proof. They shouldn't have kicked me out. No flashback, no further explanation. It's just like, yeah, I casually was at the highest tier of professional motorsports, and now I am driving a 60 horsepower 1963 Volkswagen Beetle around what appears to be like the crappiest of short courses in California.
Yes. No, I think to introduce the characters is important. So we have the first person we meet is Simon Moore III, who is like the worst cheesy rich kid villain.
By the
could
way,
think of.
He just looks like a Scottish French steward to me. So in my notes, he is listed as Scottish steward.
It's just incredible to me though that they were like, yeah, we'll throw away 2 lines of dialogue explaining this entire arch villain's backstory, and then we will basically never address it again. It was low budget at its finest.
We've got Bruce Campbell as Hank Cooper, who it's great because he has the exact same bank. He has the exact same backstory as the villain. So he was an F1 driver, but apparently he wasn't that good and he crashed a lot. And somehow both of these disgraced F1 drivers ended up in nowhere, California, and he's just a mechanic at some garage. 'Cause
like not even a good garage, like a gas station with 2 pumps kind of garage.
Talk about a fall from grace. So
he ends up, the hilarious part is Herbie ends up at a like, what is it? It's like you all start with junk cars. The mechanic have like an hour to fix the car, and then the first person to like do a lap around the track and not blow up wins.
Which I think that's actually a really good idea.
It is.
But that's about the only good idea.
The thing that floored me watching it, so they have like they lay out all the cars, and he's like, you got to enter this race because the shop is doing poorly and you've been freeloading for too long or whatever. It doesn't even matter. The movie doesn't even care why he enters the race. It's just a plot device to get him to meet Herbie. So there's like 10 mechanics and like 10 cars. And there's like a Corvair, like this huge beat up caddy. There's like an Eldorado that clearly got T-boned by something. So like there's no way the thing drives straight. And like I think those are rear-wheel drive still. So of course the drive shaft's going to be all screwed. But people are there's just a dusty air-cooled VW Bug sitting in the middle with no apparent damage. It's literally just dirty. With racing stripes. Everybody walks past. They don't even look under the hood.
That's the funniest thing to me because everybody's like, look at that crap can over there. And it's literally like a brand new car with some dust sprinkled on it.
Right. It is worth mentioning there is what I believe to be a 1969 AMC Ambassador in the background. And when the guy says, attempt to start your engines, the hood just blows clean off. Which, I've lifted the hood on my car. You would have to have a serious explosion to blow the hood off of an Ambassador.
He must have just dumped a can of starter fluid into the intake.
Well, and then the other car, the Cadillac, you mentioned, Tony, the woman starts the Cadillac and just all 4 tires go flat.
I assume that she had danger in a manifold.
Like what? Like it just goes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I don't even remember them introducing the hero.
Yeah, they don't.
Because he's completely non-memorable, and it's just like him getting yelled at by his boss, like right off the bat. But what I do remember is that the very first scene that they introduced the love interest, who I don't remember her name, Alex, okay.
Which is the actress's real name in real life,
That's
too.
Convenient.
Which makes it more confusing.
Well, she is introduced as a judge for like a competition or whatever, and it's pretty obvious that she's going to be in the movie a bunch. And just the very first scene that she is featured in, the announcer for this tiny, crappy, short course junk car racetrack literally just first word out of his mouth is sexually harassing her.
Our last judge is also reporting on our little event. You'll be sure to kiss her behind, won't you?
She is a writer for, he says, Car and Track, which is a great
Track
job
magazine.
Coming up with a fictional name for
Who
a
can't
magazine.
afford a photographer.
Right, and so she's a judge of this like jalopy race. And he says, you'll be sure to kiss her behind, which I guess is like also saying like she's a judge, so kiss up to her. But, he doesn't say be sure to kiss Simon's behind.
Last thing I want to get out about Alex's introduction. She works for Car and Track, who cannot afford a photographer. And are they too cheap? Maybe they just don't care about this little race. And also Herbie catcalls her almost immediately. Like does a weird wolf whistle with his horn.
Which is, again, it's on par with the 68 movie from what I remember. Herbie's kind of creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not quite, he doesn't use his horn as much in the original, which I think helps. But yeah, like the whole like driving a couple out to a secluded spot and locking the doors.
It calls into question Herbie's character.
Yeah.
That he's like, 2 people of the opposite gender are inside of me at the moment, and I'm going to go drive out to the middle of nowhere and lock the doors?
We've got our 3 characters here. We've got Cooper and we've got Scottish Stewart, who were rival drivers. end up in the exact same place, even though they haven't talked to each other in years. And like Scottish Stewart doesn't even say he remembers who he is.
He does the famous like,
and then
who?
Alex.
Who? You raced? Oh, you must have never beaten me. That's why I don't remember you. Like total jerk.
And then Alex also ends up in the same town. I don't know if she lives there or if she was just covering this thing, but she is also Hank's ex. So it's all very convenient. Herbie wins this race by turning into a PlayStation model and doing a wheelie down an oval track somehow.
The computer graphics in this movie are so bad. Like it literally looks like a PS2 cutscene. You are totally right.
PS1.
Yeah. It's maybe slightly better than PS1, but so Cooper's prize for this race is a big wrench and like a wreath that's made out of intake hoses, and I enjoy that.
and then at one point he says, "I kind of dig it," when he's like wearing the wreath around his neck.
I mean,
yeah, probably could have. He probably had those hoses in the corner of his garage. He could have made his own.
I thought it was stylish.
So then after that, Herbie wastes time getting into a bunch of shenanigans, like impressing the dorkiest cholos that anybody has ever seen.
Yes.
I have a feeling those were not real cholos. I think they were just some guys that they just put in the outfit, and they put them in this, what car was it? Was it a Grand Prix?
Oh gosh, my
so.
knowledge of 90s Pontiacs is weak. Yeah. But I will say, once again, we go into like PlayStation 2 mode because Herbie starts trying to do hydraulics, but like...
Yeah, and they are so impressed.
And like, it's just bad computer animation, like low budget CG. And like, you see like the computer animated humans inside him like bouncing around like rag dolls. And
I mean... The thing that struck me as so odd is like I've never come across lowrider enthusiasts that would not be hyped to see a classic air-cooled Bug. So they're showing off with like the hydros on the Pontiac, which is cool, but they're like clearly trying to upstage Herbie, and it just tonally makes no sense. Right. Like every lowrider, if I pulled up to it next to a lowrider person, I'd be like, "Could you please, hit switches? This would be cool." But they're just like, no, they gotta flex on Herbie, and then Herbie gains their respect after showing off with the hydros that he doesn't have.
My favorite thing about that hydraulics gag too is that somebody at Disney must have really liked that, because I watched the Herbie Fully Loaded trailer after watching this, and they do the same gag in that movie, the same hydraulic. Yeah,
Herbie Fully Loaded. I actually saw recently, and it's significantly better than this while still being bad.
There's definitely more money.
Yeah, I mean the effects are definitely better. Only note I got here about Cooper and Alex's relationship is that it seems to be written by and for children. Like it seems like the arguments that like whatever like third graders that think they're dating would get into. They fight a
lot too.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like at no point do they seem like they actually like each other.
There's a lot of fighting in this movie, like arguing, like a lot of like, you liked me and now you don't, and you made fun of me for being a race car driver, and and I'm like, geez, like is this like an episode of Friends?
Exactly, they literally sound like they're 8 years old.
I can't seem to stop this thing.
Oh, don't give me that, Cooper.
Because Herbie isn't it,
so
and it's a car.
Oh, yeah, of
course I have nothing to do with it.
Well, you're jealous of him.
Wait a minute. You brought up every crash I had, every blown engine, every mischief you threw my entire career at me.
Well, I liked you.
Yeah, well, I liked you too, so there.
I believe I wrote down a note at one point about how it seemed like the absolute worst of heterosexual relationships in media just distilled into 1 hour and a half long movie. Every trope, every dumb argument, all the extremely gender stereotypical hills to die on, it was there. It was a subplot in the movie.
Absolutely.
The original Love Bug has the same thing, like the whole like disaffected race car driver and like who can't handle his life, but somehow it worked better. It felt more like a real relationship, whereas this one just felt like the TV movie relationship, which it is. So, and they fight
acting and budget.
They yell all the time. Like there's like multiple argument scenes. It's exhausting.
you know, you watch something going back to the 60s, you kind of expect that, but as recently as like 97, you really shouldn't expect that, I think. So yeah, next scene, you've got Cooper's garage decides to throw an art gala where Herbie is the centerpiece, and I don't really understand why this garage is throwing an art gala. I do think that's like a throwback to the original, which is the only reason why it's there. But in the context of the movie, it doesn't make any sense. Like, Joe, do you remember that part in the first one?
The original, the first movie, you have kind of like the wacky, like quasi-spiritual sidekick to the main character, who's like the first one who can tell Herbie's alive. So in the original Love Bug, it was this guy named Tennessee, and Tennessee likes to make art out of old car pieces, and is like, I went to China and studied with the monks. This car is alive. And so in this movie,
they don't explain any
in this
of that
movie,
here.
you have his weird friend.
I actually forgot to mention one thing, is that when they're fixing up the cars, he is also there, and the car like beeps once, and he's like, oh, he's telling you to fix the distributor, and there's no explanation.
I think he said the distributor. That's what it sounded like.
Oh, did it now?
Right. The weird spiritual friend is this artist, which is like a total like 90s like, you know, like basement dweller stereotype. This guy named Roddy, who is like, this car is alive, man. And then later he's supposed to do this big. The garage isn't hosting the art gallery thing. It's Roddy is going to some car art exhibit. And he's supposed to have made something, which we never actually see. You just hear that he's like working on this magnificent art. And at the last minute, instead of taking his art, he takes Herbie and just puts Herbie on like a plinth and is like, I made this art. And like...
It's his muse.
And and then there's just like one scene where Hank's like, Roddy, why did you bring Herbie to this car show? And he's like, it's the 90s,
Hank boy.
Irony, Hank boy. I'm like...
Literally says that, actually.
Right. He's like, it's the 90s, man. I'm like, what does this mean?
I would also like it noted that Herbie also catcalls Alex at the art show as well.
Bumper and beret.
Yeah, that's true.
Again, they have a really stereotypical argument, and Herbie is kind of creepy again. That's all I remember from that part. And then what's his name? The Irish guy comes in and he steals the key out of Herbie, and then...
But Herbie does punch him in the face, which is a great...
He does!
It's very satisfying to like see him be a total jerk to everyone, and then Herbie just opens his hood right into his face.
So then Scottish Stewart, he figures out where Herbie comes from, because there's like a signature on the inside of the trunk, I believe. And so he goes to his lackey, and he's like, get me... I don't think I wrote the doctor's name down. Whatever
Dr.
German
Gustav
name.
Stupfel.
There you go. He's like
German, right?
Dr.
It's a Volkswagen.
Well, continue. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'll get to that.
I
have some thoughts on that too, but keep going. Sorry.
So Stewart goes to his lackey and he's like, fly to Germany and give me this doctor. And then the guy's like, oh, he lives like down the block.
He lives
Here he
in
is.
Pomona.
Yep. So Stewart, he brings this doctor in, and the doctor is like, I was an original designer on the Volkswagen, which, judging by the time period, and they don't come out and say this, but it's definitely implied, he is a Nazi, or at least Nazi adjacent.
There's like these bizarre like exiled Nazi scientist vibes, but like they never call it like a Volkswagen. They just call it the little car and the people's car. And it's like, but did he design the car, or did he design the metal that made the car alive? And they
I think it's pretty obvious though, because there's a flashback scene for this part for some reason. We can't see a flashback scene of the F1 racing. We can only see a flashback scene of the Nazi. But there's a scene where it's like U.S. generals after the war, which I'm pretty sure refers to, World War II. And they're like, we want you to build us this car. We heard it can live and stuff. And it's like, oh, so they literally just Werner von Braun to this guy. They were like, instead of pointing V1 rockets at the moon, instead we're just going to ask you to build us an anthropomorphic car. And that will be your excuse for all of the Nazi crimes you did.
One of my favorite things about that scene as well is whoever wrote that must not have a very high regard for the United States government or the military. And I am totally there with them, but I don't think they would be stupid enough to think that a car would be alive.
Right. There's some mistranslation between like Volkswagen meaning car of the people and him thinking the car is a people. So they kidnap this like scientist and ask him to build them a living car.
And he's just like, okay.
This is literally the point at which the Herbie story reaches like midi-chlorian level. Like, we have to establish a backstory for Herbie. We so desperately need to establish a backstory for Herbie that we just blow up the entire franchise with this ridiculousness.
I would also like it noted. So we get to see finally how he makes the car, and he's like working in a metallurgy plant, literally stirring a cauldron of wet steel with a giant comedic spoon, because they clearly just didn't care at this point when they were making the movie. And he's here stirring his metal, and he knocks in a framed photo of his Nazi girlfriend. Presumably, because we don't see her anywhere in the movie, and it's implied that she's dead, from what I could tell. So I think...
then that means that Herbie is the wife? Or what?
It implies impregnated with his love for his girlfriend.
The movie implies that the framed photo is what gave the car sentience.
The question is Herbie the reincarnation of this woman, or is it just like love? His love spontaneously caused Herbie to be alive. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's the second. I think it's just like strong emotions create life, which is a stupid premise, but it's perhaps less problematic than just like reincarnating your German girlfriend.
One of the few things I remembered back from when I was a kid is the whole picture thing, because how could you ever forget that? But when I
slow motion shot of it falling into the molten metal.
Yeah. But when I watched it as a kid, I always assumed that the wife's soul was inside the car. But in the movie, they don't actually say that. They just say some nonsense about love.
He says, I realize this is not very scientific, but I think my feelings for her were transmogrified into the car. I'm like, you're right, that's not scientific. So Herbie lore is extremely complex because in the very first movie, Jim Douglas says, they build 10,000 cars, they build 10 million cars, and all of them are the same. One car turns out to have something special. So that implies Herbie's the only one. But then, in Herbie Rides Again, he rounds up a herd of other air-cooled beetles to go attack the villain. So that implies all beetles are alive. But then, in Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, there's a Lancia that's alive.
Yes, I remember that.
So... But then we go back to Herbie Goes Bananas, and he's the only one that's alive. So then it's like, are all cars alive? Are some cars alive?
So Scottish accepts all of this without question, and he contracts the guy to build him an evil Herbie called Horus the Hate Bug, and he puts his own photo in the metal. And then also Horace makes a CGI frowny face.
Yes, when he gets mad. And so the funny thing is that originally Horace is just going to be a living little car. It isn't until his assistant, Rupert, he says to Rupert, get me a photo of someone I love. And Rupert brings Simon a photo of himself, at which point we pass the point of no return where Simon decides, I am going to cause the universe to implode by making a hate bug Volkswagen.
He puts his own soul inside the car, which I have questions about that, but that's going to come near the end. There's deep philosophical questions that are going to come up at the end.
Horace does wind up looking pretty cool. The big shame is that this movie came out right before the new Beetle came out, and so it would have made way more sense to make Horace a new Beetle, but like that didn't exist yet. It literally like the movie debuted, and then like the same year, like the new Beetle was released.
Yeah.
So they
It
missed
also has,
opportunity there.
It has like stupid window louvers on it. Like you can clearly tell that they cannot see anywhere out of that thing.
It is entirely blacked out.
It's real bad. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
murdered out bug, that'll be cool. And then I saw it and I was like, this is a tragedy of styling decisions.
I also love that, like, this didn't even exist at the time, but whatever they dub over the engine sounds like a Bugatti Veyron, which is hilarious.
Right. Right. Herbie drives Roddy home from the art show with no key. And then Herbie gets mad at Hank because Hank still is not a believer yet. He doesn't believe Herbie's alive. Hank gets really mad because everybody's saying, I didn't win this race, the car did everything, and nobody respects me for being a big race driver with a fragile ego. And
I like how we haven't mentioned Hank at all in like the past 20 minutes.
So Herbie's feelings get hurt that Hank doesn't like him. And Hank's feelings are hurt that Herbie's getting all the credit for winning this one lap around a racetrack. And so Herbie runs off into the city. And here we get back into the remake territory of this happens in the 68 version of the film as well. Herbie runs off into like scary downtown, which is clearly like just like a back lot at Disney. And Herbie runs off into downtown. And so Hank has to go find Herbie on foot.
And then speaking of a murdered out Beetle, Horace just straight up murders Herbie.
Yes.
Off screen because they could not or would not figure out how to make that look anywhere near decent.
They just play
two cars
smashing.
fighting.
They play smashing sound effects where Rupert grimaces as the cars are off screen.
To be fair, so the thing that really shook me to my core about this scene was that, yes, the assault occurs off screen. Herbie's death occurs on screen. Hank or whatever walks up, holds him in his arms as the light fades from his eyes, and is like, "Oh no, what did they do to you?" And then Herbie dies on screen.
There are two moments where I actually enjoy Bruce Campbell in this because he's wasted for the most of it. Like, I really enjoy him as an actor, and in this movie he has nothing to do except I love him like cradling Herbie's like, you know, smashed up corpse. He really sells that like as if it's a person.
Well, and it is the one part of the movie that is like extremely emotional that like he
There's, like,
finally
pouring rain.
realizes he finally realizes Herbie is alive just in time for Herbie to literally get murdered. And it's very like, it's sad, but at the same time you're like creeped out because he's like, you literally watched a human, well, not human, but a living thing get murdered. And it's I don't know, it's very uncomfortable.
Yep.
That's a good way to put the whole movie.
Like to watch his headlight go out.
Yeah, that
like as Bruce is as Hank Cooper is holding the car, like holding the fender, to watch the headlight turn off. You're like, this is uncomfortable.
You literally watch the light fade from Herbie's eyes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
it's
they
like
just
Forrest Gump and Bubba.
As a kid, I was severely troubled by this. Like as a child watching this on the Wonderful World of Disney, it was not wonderful. It was terrible. It's very uncomfortable, and it's like, I don't know if it was this like edgy reboot. It's like, what if Herbie, it's like there's a board meeting and a guy's like, what if Herbie dies? That's what kids like, murder.
It's
like,
bold of you to say they had a meeting about this movie first.
They throw him like a soldier's funeral.
Yeah.
Right. He's in a giant wooden box. And there's like fresh dirt around the grave. Like they're going to bury a car.
Yep. I don't think OSHA would be okay with that.
I don't think OSHA would be fine with it. I think it's the EPA that would have some concerns.
Oh yeah, EPA.
It's gonna be a Superfund site with all that leaded gas.
Yep. So then, in the middle of this funeral, the Nazi walks on screen and is like, "Hey, somehow I know that we can bring him back to life."
Well, I will say, we finally see Jim Douglas, the actor Dean Jones, who plays Jim Douglas for the first time for the first Herbie movie. And like as a kid, I was so relieved in this scene. Like Jim Douglas comes out, he says, "I'm Jim Douglas. I was a friend of Herbie's." And like he is the only actor in this movie who is like doing his job. Like Dean Jones shows up. Yes. What a wild idea. Dean Jones shows up and like everything is going to be okay.
A responsible adult has showed up on the set of the movie and it actually shows.
The other thing I don't understand about this is that they say like they need to use all the original parts, but like those parts are like way gone. Like do they melt them down like back to basic steel and then remold all of the pieces? That's the only thing that makes any sense. But of course they're not going to show this because they have no money.
No, so Dr. Stoffel says unless we remold Herbie's original parts, he will not be alive when we put him back together.
Yep.
Which brings the question, like, where do we draw the line? Like oil filter, spark plugs, tires, like okay, I get the body panels in the engine, but like what if Herbie gets like new piston rings? Like where do we draw the line on what makes him alive and not alive?
Exactly.
And so we just get this like random side character who like Hank has upset, who owns like a custom fabrication shop, and Hank's just like, yeah, I've been a poor slob with no money the entire film, but suddenly I have thousands of dollars to pay a custom fabricator to rebuild a 63 Bug. And the guy's just like, you pay me money, I'll do it. You know, you're like, okay.
I think that's literally his line, and he does have a cigar in his mouth when he says it.
Right, he says, I'm paying. He says, if you're paying, I'm playing. And you're like, okay, well, we'll just patch this plot hole up with some duct tape and keep on going.
Yeah. And he gets out of like a stupid shark car.
The shark car is actually kind of cool though, right? Like
Dean Jones, I feel like they had him for one day of shooting, so at the end of that he's like, bye.
And he literally just walks off set.
He bounces out.
I wrote down notes that I unfortunately lost some of before recording, but I do remember verbatim I wrote down, oh, I see his checks ran out. Because he literally, like, the car is not even done yet. He's just like, here's a spare key so you can start Herbie. I'm leaving. And he literally just walks through the middle of this backlot studio. And that's it. You don't see him at all. Like, there's another climactic scene. And he's nowhere to be found. He's just like, good luck.
He is
Herbie
there at the very end, I think. He is there at the very end, like, congratulating them. But that was probably the same day of shooting.
Probably was.
Because it's the same set. I will say I do really like the scene where Herbie comes back to life and they let Dean Jones be the one to start the car. And like once again, he's the only actor here who's actually acting. Like that scene where Herbie comes back to life and I'm touched.
See, that's
like this is the one part of the movie that feels genuine.
The thing that was weird to me watching this was like so that he clearly carries the only acting in this movie. But if let's say you're 8 in 1997, which was older than I actually was, but like let's just pretend I was, and you're watching this for the first time on TV, and you might not have seen The Love Bug, and you definitely like, maybe it's because my brain doesn't work completely right, but I always would have, like as a kid, I would have had a really hard time being like, oh, this actor is the same one from 30 years ago in this other movie. And they're just like, yeah, I used to drive Herbie, and that's supposed to be all the connection you're giving to, like, a new generation you're introducing to it, you know?
I don't feel like this movie is made for anyone, but if it's made for somebody, I feel like it was made for people who were kids in the 60s.
Oh, totally.
That's the only thing that makes sense.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So all of our characters meet to settle the score with one last race, and there were only 2 races in the movie, but the second race. And so during this race, the boss, the garage owner, has a terrible slapstick bit, which is obviously there just to fill time,
Yes.
in which his car will not start. And most of it, he is off of the screen, which means there is a frame of empty road just on screen the whole time.
The thing that I think is funny too is that even in that incredibly lazy scene where they show nothing on screen, I actually saw the boom mic drop into the shot
Seriously?
as the cars took. I swear to God, it was so
saw it.
like
I gotta see
I'm
that.
watching a 480p VHS rip from 1997 on a streaming service, and I still see the boom mic.
Yes.
It was just, and it's like all the cars do is they literally floor it, drive away, and then he walks off screen. One take, like you couldn't have reshot it like once to get the mic out. It's pathetic.
I love, as soon as this race gets off, we've got pro driver Hank Cooper cannot drive, and Herbie has to take over for him, and Herbie's big trick is to push the gas pedal all the way down.
Yes. It's like time to go fast, and then it's like let's just show footage of like the gas pedal depressing on its own.
Yeah, Hank did not think about giving it full throttle, apparently.
Or shifting, because apparently that needs to be done. Herbie needs to shift for him also.
Yep. So the most impressive driving these pro drivers do is some swerving around and like half of one drift. It was more like an e-brake. There was like no power slide in there.
And the goal is, it's a pit race for pinks. Whoever wins gets the other person's car. For some reason, the German scientist has convinced Hank that the negative Herbie must be destroyed because he's too evil, which I guess is like where he draws the line is like World War II, totally fine, but building a badly tuned Herbie is crossing a line. So again, raising ethical questions for this guy. But so that
he was just following orders.
I'm not touching that one. Anyway, I was just gonna like put it in more abstract terms than that, but okay.
It's bad. It's bad. I love the part where he throws the flag off screen and just says, "They're all gonna die." Like the two cars take off, and he's just like, "They're all gonna die."
I don't think they break 50.
No, it is the slowest race of all time. They're going like 35 the entire time.
Because they're stock Beetles.
Yes. At least in the original, sorry to interrupt, but I have to say, in the original, they actually put a Porsche engine in the Volkswagen they used for the racing scenes. Now they didn't upgrade the clutch or the brakes, but they did give the original VW did have a Porsche engine in it. But yeah, in this, I mean, they're like, "Oh, we're going so fast." I'm like, they're going like 35. It's bad.
Yep. So Horace whips out evil upgrades. He's got chariot like Ben-Hur spikes. He's got grenades, and he has a laser.
Grenades.
Yeah.
Like literal explosives
that do nothing.
Yeah.
He could have spat at the car
bombs.
behind them, and it would have done more because the grenades are like blowing up literally next to Herbie, and Herbie is completely unfazed.
As a kid, though, I was like so excited by the grenades. Nowadays, it's like, oh, that looks terrible. But I mean, it's still. I'm excited by it now, just because the rest of the film leaves me so wanting. It's like, oh, thank God, something is happening. So the team. So Herbie gets a flat tire. Was it the grenade that gives him a flat tire?
No, it's the tire spike thing, the Ben-Hur tire spikes.
Spike gives him a flat tire, and so they pull over. Scottish Stewart is driving off into the distance, and then Alex and Hank are like arguing forever. He doesn't want to keep going, and she's like, "No, you gotta do it. And finally they slap this tire on, which he says that the spare tire was the only thing I didn't have time to fix, which is odd, because why wouldn't you fix that? That's the only thing. Like,
literally polishes the chrome bezels for like the headlights and stuff, and he's like, "Spare tire, who needs it?" Which, to be fair, is how I used to drive my old car, because I couldn't find tires that would fit in the spare tire well after I upgraded the wheels. But anywho,
anyway, so the the spare tire being flat does not matter anyway because they slap it on, and the artist guy, what was his name?
Roddy.
Roddy, he has spray paint in there, and they put spray paint in the tire as if that's going to fix it, like fix a flat or something.
Yes.
Which somehow that works.
Yes, he says it's a good thing you're an artist, and then they pump up the tire with spray paint.
When they're dealing with the whole flat tire debacle, you see Horace like driving way off into the distance, and Scottish Stewart and his assistant like pop open champagne, and they're like drinking behind the wheel.
It's apple cider.
Yes, they
Sure.
say, guess who brought your favorite sparkling cider?
Yeah,
I
because
did.
it's Disney. Anyway, so yeah, they're doing that way off in the distance, and then they fix the flat tire, and they get back in the car, and they catch up like 3 seconds later. Makes zero sense. So, Herbie is magically able to drive and maintain balance after being lasered in two by Horace, and the passenger side ekes ahead and wins the race, which it's somehow able to accelerate despite,
Having its
having
engine
half...
cut in two.
Exactly.
Somehow
I
that
wouldn't
doesn't
question
kill
it.
Herbie.
Right, so being smashed to pieces kills him, but being sawed in half doesn't?
That's right, yeah. After Herbie wins the race, Horace is just overcome with rage, and he has his angry CGI face on, and
His
he
bumper
attempts...
frowns.
Oh, yeah. He attempts to, murder Herbie once again, pushing him off the cliff, but he misses and instead jumps off the cliff and then splats on the ground and sinks into what appears to be hell.
And the flames shoot out from the earth as a single wheel and tire flies up and rolls around.
Yes.
Like, so this is all awful, terrible 90s CGI, like totally fake. So evil Herbie flies, like you said, flies into the bowels of hell and self-destructs.
The thing that I actually thought about that was that it was a really lazy cop-out, because the German doctor was like, oh, we gotta kill Horace because he's too evil. So really, it just saved him from having to like drive a stake through a boxer motor.
And the best part is the cop that arrests Simon and Rupert, where he comes up and he says, building an illegal, unregistered devil car, destroying said devil car, or he says illegal dumping of said devil car.
Yeah. Yeah, in my notes it says he's thrown in prison for not having a license plate.
Yes.
But I also have the deep philosophical question about Horace being banished to hell. So Stewart puts his soul inside of Horace. So if Horace is, exorcised or whatever and is banished to hell, does that mean that Scottish Stewart is also banished to hell?
See, I actually read that scene differently. I don't think he actually went to hell. I think the car sank into the ground and flames shot out because it was way cheaper for them to animate it than it would have been for them to actually drop the car
Blow
off a
up the
cliff. And they wanted to sell the car after, which apparently they did because some private owner has it now. I've seen one picture of it, which
Oh my god.
it's hideous. I don't know why anybody would buy it, but they kept they probably only made one for this movie because, I mean, look at the movie.
Horus the Hate Bug.
Yeah, and I thought it was just the car exploded. What it does bring up the question of is there an entangling of the souls? Like, it's presumed that Herbie's soul was imbued to him by the German scientist's dead girlfriend. Presumably dead girlfriend. We don't actually know, but a picture of her. And so that fell into the vat, and then, like, that gave Herbie his characteristics. Does Simon using a photo of himself mean that he has, like, transferred his soul? Did he never have a soul? Is that why Horace is so evil?
Is
it because
Horace a Horcrux? Now we're getting into alternate lore.
Well, and the other thing that I'm curious about too is, like, and this is clearly just because it's me, but Herbie is implied to be male, I think, throughout most of the movies.
Right.
And their cars do, as far as I can tell, based on what I remember in, and maybe this is just my reading of it, but they are implied to have gender. Perhaps they actually aren't supposed to be, but I think the movie makers were trying to give them some sense of gender. I believe the cars are referred to with gendered terms, both he and her.
Because Herbie falls in love with the pretty little Lancia.
Exactly, and like that could be like a twink. I don't know how cars work in those terms, but like I'm pretty sure that the Lancia and the Yellow Beetle in the '05 Lindsay Lohan remake are both referred to as she. So I have questions about like how does gender work for cars, and is Herbie a trans man?
Is the Love Bug 1997 canon or non-canon?
Well, I'm just assuming that it is, because if we assume it's not, this podcast is a lot less interesting. If Herbie was originally, I guess, born, however you want to say, with like the soul of a woman, and then is portrayed throughout the movies as a guy, I'm just gonna assume that like I'm calling that queer representation because I don't get it anywhere else.
Yep.
Or it goes back to where Herbie got his life from. Is it just love that makes him alive, or is he literally a reincarnation?
I'm probably at some point after this, I'm gonna draw a Herbie, but with like blue and pink stripes instead of blue and red.
It's a good idea.
I'm just calling that canon. That's my head canon now.
Well, and then now finally Alex apparently is popular enough that she can get a photographer for her magazine shoot.
Exactly.
To take photos of Herbie at a gas station. Like,
with a completely unrelated married couple.
A wedding at a gas
standing
station.
in the car, yeah. They do the married couple in the car, and it's supposed to be like, oh, they're getting married or whatever, and they pan up to their faces, and that's supposed to be the reveal that it's not them. And I was like, oh, they got married, because I just like forgot what they looked like. Because Hank made such an impression on me that I forgot what his face looked like, and I was like, yeah, it's a guy standing in a car. It's clearly him. Yeah. And then and then Hank walks up and he's like, oh, I don't know why you're doing this shoot. And I was like, oh, it's not actually them. I just thought that was where the movie had to go, because like that's cliche.
Everybody lived happily ever after. And then Herbie, they get into Herbie and ride him. They get into the back seat, and Herbie drives them off into the sunset as their chauffeur. But like the road they drive down is like a super crappy road. Mm-hmm. Like there's just like random like 1980s cars parked alongside it. Like
I didn't even notice that part. I was just like, thank God it's over.
It's really impressive. I don't know if either of you have seen a bunch of Bruce Campbell movies or roles. Have you? No? Okay.
I've seen the Spider-Man trilogy.
Yeah. Well, he's barely in that. He has like a cameo in each one.
Cameo appearances.
But anyway, if you've like followed Bruce Campbell's career, you would know like it is really impressive to make Bruce Campbell not memorable. He's like always the most charismatic guy in the room, and it does not show through here. As far as a closing thoughts on the movie, I would posit a question, which is like, it's obviously not a good movie, but if you were in charge of fixing this movie, what would you do? And I'll go first. Well, first of all, I would get rid of the like stock footage montage in the beginning, and I would put a backstory there for the characters so we know who they are and have a reason to root for them. I feel like that's pretty obvious. And then all of the goofing off stuff in the middle, the stupid lowrider bit, get rid of that. Have the characters talking and expressing personalities. Basic screenwriting here. And then also, you know, when Herbie dies, I feel like that part was also just to fill time, because it doesn't really amount to anything in the grand scheme of things. Like, he dies, they fix him up, that's the end of it. I would get rid of that. I would put more dialogue, probably put a couple more races in there so it's exciting, and get some real stunt driving in there, do some drifts, maybe some jumps. You know, the gadgets were neat. Do those better. But I feel like, you know, the solution here really is just inject it full of money and get better screenwriters. Anyway, what do you two have thoughts on that? Tony, how about you go first?
I think the thing that I would have done is like, it's really not super hard to do car choreography. Like, that was so damn lazy. Like, You can. It's really like I'm working on doing car videos for 2021 for Trust in the Machine. We're trying to do like YouTube series stuff, and like even just doing scenes where you're like, oh, Herbie's driving around. Maybe we'll do like a Petrolicious style, like, car driving back and forth and like swerving around traffic, or like a chase between him and Horace as like Horace is trying to beat him up. Like, it's not that hard for Disney, who has already bought a bunch of cameras clearly and blew a bunch of money on CGI, to just be like, okay, instead of these cheesy CGI things, we'll put like car stuff in. Because even as like, nowadays, obviously I want to see car footage. As a 8-year-old or 9-year-old, I would have wanted to see car footage then too. I would watch VHS tapes of like excavators and trains and, highway traffic, because I thought it was entertaining. Maybe that's just me because I'm weird, but like that's got to be a significant portion of like who liked Herbie. There were so many good races and stuff. That's what made it memorable. I don't remember the cheesy love stuff from when I'm 7. I remember Herbie racing the Porsche 917 clone. It's like not that hard. So just please, for the love of God, it's a car movie. Make the cars race. Like, it's not that bad. They did actually get that better in the 05 remake.
Oh, yeah.
It's cheesy
There's
and dumb,
actual
but there's
racing.
actually like 5 races in it, and some of them are fun. It's pretty good. That's all I got. There's a lot of other things, like maybe don't imply that Herbie has a soul that can be taken. Don't imply that the person who created him is a Nazi. Don't imply that like the cars can be brought back from the dead. Like, the resurrection is really undersold in our retelling of this, but it's very, very ethically disturbing. And maybe just like maybe don't introduce your main female lead with like sexually harassing her on screen.
Yeah,
I think those are my big takeaways.
That
That'd
reminds
be how
me.
I'd change it.
I
Yeah,
forgot to
yeah.
mention, like, one of the very final notes of the movie is Herbie Wolfless whistling her
Well, I
again.
guess you'd look pretty good in one of those.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so don't make Herbie creepy. There we
Yes.
go. That would be cool. That'd be a great addition. Anyway, Joe, what do you think? I'm sorry,
No,
I'm done now.
I agree. Making him less creepy. Like, I don't like movies about matchmaking, and I don't like Herbie's. That's like a thing about the Herbie franchise. It's matchmaking. That would be nice to see that gone. But yeah, I think the obvious cure is add more cars, add more racing. And the thing is, if you zoom out and actually look at the plot, it's not a terrible pitch. Like, down on his luck racing driver gets a living car that turns his life around.
Yeah.
It sounds
and
very
then,
familiar, but it's definitely not a bad pitch.
Right. And then like evil, and then even the idea of like, hey, let's make a Herbie movie and make an evil Herbie. Even that in and of itself isn't awful, like as a premise, but it's just the execution. More racing, higher stakes, more contests. I mean, and even like, I think the problem is you get into a problem with trying to give Herbie a backstory and like an origin story. Like, sometimes it's just okay for it to be a living car and you don't need an explanation as to why.
Yep.
But I mean, I guess you couldn't make an evil Herbie if you didn't know how the original Herbie was created. So that's tough. I don't know. I mean, unless he finds an evil Herbie, but
Which would have been better.
It's magic. Who cares?
honestly, yes. Yeah. So, but I will say, I have thought long and hard about the entire Herbie franchise and where I would rank this, like, amongst the other Herbie films. And honestly, it's not the worst one, which is kind of that's faint praise. But yeah, I think it could have been, you could have kept the same plot and made the movie better. And I think it starts and ends with adding more racing.
Yeah. What do you think is the worst one? Herbie Goes Bananas?
Maybe. Herbie Goes Bananas or Herbie Rides Again. And I like them both. I enjoy them. I own them. They're highly enjoyable films. I mean, I dressed up as Herbie for Halloween one year. Like, I was Jim Douglas and had the helmet, and my mom made me a cardboard car to wear around. Yes, I mean, yeah.
Clearly, I
we
like
have-
this. Like,
this was on my Christmas tree
And
this winter.
I've got some Honda keys.
I mean, I have those around here somewhere too, but
But yeah, more racing would make it better. I mean, show us the cars. That's what we want to see. And the cars doing fun stuff. That's,
Absolutely. So to close out, Toni, where can people find you and your stuff?
I've got podcast and articles up on
.com.
Yeah, trustthemachine.com. I'm on Twitter at Mikuru Bayahina. Just a terrible handle, but I refuse to change it. Just a bunch of people follow me. Like, just,
I'll type that on the screen.
Type it out, please, because nobody's gonna know it. And then we've got, I think that's the main places. Yeah, you can see all my art and
Instagram.
stuff there. And I'll actually have some cool new freelance stuff coming up, but I can't talk about it yet. So.
Mm-hmm. It's Raymu Racing on Instagram, right?
Yeah, Raymu Racing on Instagram.
And Joe, what about you?
You can find me on the YouTube channel AutoMoments, where I do stories about old cars nobody cares about, including a lot of AMCs. So if you like AMCs or Studebakers or all those kinds of things, go watch my garbage. I'm also on Twitter, just at Joe Ligo. But no, this was highly enjoyable. I love the Herbie movies despite their flaws and gaping plot holes. And so this was very fun for me to go back and I had not watched the 1997 Love Bug for probably close to 15 years. So this was an enjoyable experience, even though it's not Oscar-worthy material.
All right. And then I got stuff all around. I got Twitter and Instagram. Those are MotorFriend with an underscore in the middle. I got a website, MotorFriend.net. I never put anything on there. Occasionally I have work in larger publications, and I'll link it back there when I do. And then on YouTube, you can subscribe right here. Watch Drive-In Theater. There will be more reviews, hopefully weekly. We'll see how scheduling works out. Wednesday nights. And then on Friday nights soon, I will also be giving people kind of a tour through my massive racing game collection. So I'll basically be doing a new one of those every week, a new game, and that's going to be called Race Night. And that's it for me. Either of you got any more thoughts?
It was high. This was so much fun. I'm so.
It was really fun. Yeah, that's all I got though. I appreciate you having me on. And
yeah, thanks. This has been great.
Please, next time the movie should be better. That's all I got.
Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.